Hey, what up, y'all? Good morning. Well, it's like 5 in the morning when I'm recording this, doing some editing. I just wanted to jump on here real quick and talk to you guys for a second. This is a very sweet person who's been very active in the community, like the Don't Fret Read books or the Don't Fret 64 community, whatever you want, the Don't Fret community, whatever. This is a very sweet person, and they're pretty young. They're like just turned 20 in the last couple of months. And so a lot of responsibilities, a lot of pressure have fallen onto this person because they were their dad's primary caregiver, and now a lot of decisions have to be made, and they're trying to figure out like bank stuff, funeral preparations, and all this. And so they've spun up a GoFundMe to help with their dad's funeral. And so if anybody's willing and able to help out, I've put the link to the GoFundMe in the description of this video. And I just thought I'd let y'all know because a lot of my subscribers are really sweet, generous people. And maybe some of you have been there before and you want to help out. I don't know, but I just thought I'd let y'all know. So thank you so much for your support for this person and for clicking play on this video. And let's get into it. Hey, what's happening? My name is D, and welcome back to another episode of Book Reviews with the Regular Dude. Today we're going to be talking about Babel by R.F. Kuang. I recently reviewed Yellowface by the same author, and I didn't really like it because I really didn't like the main character.
Oh, but D, that's the whole point. You're not supposed to like the character.
I know that. I get that. You don't have to explain it to me. But I personally feel like anybody who kind of disagrees with the main character's point of view would also find this character infuriating, and anybody for whom this main character is like a caricature or a mirror, they're not gonna get it because they don't have the self-reflection necessary to like unpack their own internalized racism, stuff like that. To me, this character is just the antagonist from a movie like Remember the Titans or The Green Book or something, where they're so cartoonishly racist that racists would be like,
well, I'm not that racist, so I must be fine.
but I'm not talking about Yellowface, I'm talking about Babel, which I wanted to read because I want to see if R.F. Kuang maybe wasn't the author for me or if it was just Yellowface that isn't for me. This review is going to be kind of like a rant, but I'm still going to use the Four Seeds method. I didn't take any notes while I was reading it because for the first like 30% of the book, I didn't think there was anything worth taking notes of. Nothing happened that I thought was worth taking note of, is what I'm exhausted. This is the fourth video I've filmed today. So I'm going to read the premise of this book, and then I'm going to get into my 4C's rant review. From award-winning author R.F. Kuang comes Babel, a historical fantasy epic that grapples with student revolutions, colonial resistance, and the use of language and translation as the dominating tool of the British Empire. Traduttore, or traditore, an act of translation is always an act of betrayal. 1828. Robin Swift, orphaned by cholera in Canton, is brought to London by the mysterious Professor Lovell. There he trains for years in Latin, ancient Greek, and Chinese, all in preparation for the day he'll enroll in Oxford University's prestigious Royal Institute of Translation, also known as Babel. The tower and its students are the world's center of translation and, more importantly, magic. Silverworking, the art of manifesting the meaning lost in translation using enchanted silver bars, has made the British unparalleled in power, as the arcane craft serves the Empire's quest for colonization. For Robin, Oxford is a utopia dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge. But knowledge obeys power, and as a Chinese boy raised in Britain, Robin realizes serving Babel means betraying his motherland. As his studies progress, Robin finds himself caught between Babel and the shadowy Hermes Society, an organization dedicated to stopping imperial expansion. When Britain pursues an unjust war with China over silver and opium, Robin must decide. Can powerful institutions be changed from within, or does revolution always require violence? So I'm going to use the 4C's method. I've used it a few times before. For those of you who don't know or don't remember, the 4C's are character, conflict, context, and craft. Anyways, let's get into character. It would make sense to talk about the main character, Robin Swift, first, but I'm not going to do that. First thing that I want to talk about is some of the, like, white characters in this book. I would perceive them to be the villains of the book. Not all of them. Like, there's a couple minor characters that are fine, but I would say, like, the main, like, the white characters that get a lot of screen time, page time. Even one of Robin's like closer friends turns out to kind of be a villain at the end. But one of the things that I thought was different about these ones is because we don't spend nearly as much time in their head. These characters who are probably even more racist than the main character of Yellowface don't feel cartoonish. There still is like a lack of subtlety to their characterization and their bigotry, but I definitely believe them more. I think one of the issues that I had with Yellowface, which a commenter on my Yellowface reviews worded it way better than I did, but it was like R.F. Kuang doesn't actually know how a racist white person's mind works, so she just kind of like filled June Hayward's head with all these like cartoonishly racist sort of Michael Scott-esque things. We don't really get that with most of these characters. I think there's one interlude chapter thing where we get an inside look into the mind of Letty, and she's almost like a representation of white feminism, but we don't go that deep with her. And so the bigotry of these characters makes way more sense to me. Like, some of the extremely, like even the more extreme cartoonishly racist side characters that we meet for like a scene, they make more sense because we don't spend time trying to figure out how they think. We just see them do and hear them say terrible things, with the exception of Letty. But again, we only spend like that one chapter or maybe like 2 chapters from her perspective, and that's not enough time for me to be like, but why do you think these ways? And a lot of the justifications for the way that she is make way more sense to me than June Hayward. One of my patrons started reading this before me and talked about how much they disliked Letty, and I understand the dislike because they are really annoying with their like not even microaggressions, because I don't really think microaggressions are a thing. I think it's all just aggression. But I think because I know so many people who are like Letty now, it didn't really bother me so much as it was like, oh yeah, I saw someone like that at Thanksgiving. I did find her interesting because she's truly convinced that she's in the right the entire time, and she sees herself as the hero of the story, essentially, which I think is the way for a lot of people like Letty. But she also ends up being, if not a villain, an antagonist in the story, and she ends up killing another character in the book who she had like romantic feelings for. And that character, Remy, I didn't find really interesting at all. I don't think that we spent a ton of time getting to know him. Like, we spent a little bit of time, but I don't know, he just didn't jump out to me. But I did find that he was really important, and like Letty refers to him as her Remy at one point in the book, but they were never together. She just liked him, and even then, that like feeling of ownership over a man of color I thought was really interesting, and again just kind of embodies that white feminism. And I don't know, so like this is another racist character that R.F. Kuang's written, but this one, while still annoying, I just found a little bit more compelling and a little bit more like, I guess because she's toned down, I was able to almost, because she's toned down, she felt more human and more nuanced. And so I think it's like R.F. Kuang can definitely write a racist character, but I can't spend an entire book from that racist character's point of view. I don't know if any author of color could or should write from that perspective and get it accurately. You know what I'm saying? There is some tension between the main character, Robin, and Letty, because I think they both have romantic feelings for Remy. At least that was my understanding. And I found Robin to be an interesting character in the sense that, like, I didn't like him at all, but I did root for him. But at the same time, and maybe this is more of like a conflict thing, I didn't really know what I was rooting for him for. You know, I didn't really know what he wanted to accomplish, like up until the end, obviously. But even when he was making choices that I didn't like morally agree with, I found myself just kind of being like, well, I hope that works out for you, dog. I think it's revealed relatively early in the book, but he's half Asian, half white. And so I'm not the same mix as him, but I am mixed race. And so I think there was some relatability there for me, but not exactly, because I don't pass for white like at all. Whereas Robin kind of does in some contexts. Some people, like, they see him and they see a Chinese person, and some people didn't believe that he was Chinese. And like those sorts of conversations I'm kind of familiar with, because there are some spaces where, you know, people ask me what I am, with like the same enthusiasm and fervor they ask what breed of dog is that. And that can seem like a really specific reference, but hold on a second. This is Sophie and Diva. These are the dogs that I grew up with. They are Ibizenhounds, and every time I took them for a walk, somebody would stop me and be like,
What kind of dog is that?
and anytime I would go somewhere new, like a new school, or my friend would introduce me to a new group of friends or something like that, people would ask me what I am with the same like curiosity and dehumanizing look in their eye. And they wouldn't even ask me my name most of the time. So like in that sense, I felt like I related to Robin, but at the same time, the experience would be different because I don't have like any white privilege. I can't really speak to how well the author captured the half-white experience, obviously, but I could relate to some aspects of Robin's character and some of the like struggles that he had. You know, obviously he definitely makes a lot of choices like in favor of like self-preservation. That's a big aspect of his character, and he makes choices where he's clearly trying to carve out a safe space for himself within white supremacy, within colonialism, within patriarchy. And part of his character arc is realizing that he'll never fully be able to do that. And while I definitely didn't have the same opportunities or was never going to be able to like find a space like that when I was a teenager, I definitely made a lot of like I'm the token black guy in the group type of jokes to like appease the guys on my teams and in my crews and stuff like that. And to this day, I'm pretty ashamed of that. And like I would, if I met young me, I would probably whoop his ass just for saying some of the dumb shit that he said when he was 13.
But D, everyone says dumb shit when they were young, and you shouldn't be so hard on yourself.
What are you, my therapist? I didn't think so. Mind your business. On with this review. And yeah, there are other characters like there's a black woman and an Indian man, and they provided sort of like, and I wouldn't say we go super deep with either of them. Like we get an interlude chapter with them to get to know them a little bit better, but I feel like they're there to kind of show Robin, like they're just a few steps further away from white privilege, or several steps further away from white privilege and male privilege than Robin. And they're kind of catalysts for him really seeing that he doesn't have a place in this society, really. I think that R.F. Kuang did a good job of these characters feel more human, and these characters make a little bit more sense to me than any of the characters from like Yellowface. So let's move on to conflict. I think for a big chunk of the book, most of the conflict is more internal than anything else. Like pretty early on in the book, Robin gets involved in, I guess, not espionage, but he does get involved with this society that is trying to stop colonialism and trying to sabotage Babel and all this stuff, but it's pretty low stakes for most of it. He does almost die once, so I guess the stakes were kind of high there. But it was pretty early in the book, so I figured he wasn't going to die yet. And so for a lot of that, it was like just kind of internal struggles of him going through life and feeling that tension that I think a lot of people who find themselves sort of like with a foot in two different worlds feel. I hate to say it, but I feel like R.F. Kuang doesn't write with a lot of heart. I didn't feel a ton of the emotional tension that this character's like going through. Like I knew it was happening because the book told me, but I didn't really feel it. There were obviously points where I was like, oh yeah, that's relatable. Oh yeah, I've experienced something like that. Or I've heard something like that because I have cousins that are part white, part Asian, and we've had talks about being mixed like at length before. Then when the conflict moves from the internal to more of the external and things start to happen, and Robin accidentally murders someone and then they got to cover it up and they're on the run and stuff like that, I felt engaged there. Like I felt the excitement, especially since it was kind of later in the book. I was like, oh, things are really cooking now. Let's go. And this is a major spoiler for the end, but basically they try to force this tower, the Babel, to go on strike and to shut down operations so that the empire will fall. And the British government like doesn't meet any of their demands, and they basically like kill London. I guess like, you know, Like they make London sort of unlivable because it ran on the kind of magic that Babel produces and only Babel produces and stuff. And so Robin decides that the only course of action is to destroy the tower, Babel, but he and his cohorts would have to stay in it, or a bunch of them anyway. And so the book ends, or like the second to last chapter ends with Robin and these other people dying basically in like a terrorist attack by suicide. And I don't love the end in a sense. Like I don't love that I don't love death by suicide. That's there I've lost some friends to suicide, and that shit, like, even now, like it messes with me. I have some trauma there for sure. And I'm not a big fan of acts of terror, I don't like violence like that. So it's like, I'm not saying like, oh, it's good that happened. I'm not like, hell yeah, do that thing. But I do think that this book but I do think that the author kind of put these characters in a situation there was no way out of. And I criticize a lot of other books for like making me feel like the stakes aren't high and that there's always an easy way out. And the fact that R.F. Kuang didn't give these characters one and then be like, and they solved colonialism, I think is really good. And the fact that R.F. Kuang like decided to tackle these themes but didn't necessarily provide the answer, I think is a good thing. I think that R.F. Kuang is pretty ambitious in the themes that she chooses to tackle, based off of these two things that I've read. I haven't read her trilogy. I might. And I think that a lot of her writing is kind of pretty heavy-handed with the themes as well, but I think that's fine. And I think in some ways there's like almost a lack of nuance, or maybe it's just that lack of heart, and how some of the characters don't really feel like people. They just feel like this character is here to serve this function. I have something else to say on that in the craft section of this review, but yeah, I think that the themes were tackled thoughtfully. I don't know how well I think they were handled. I don't think they were handled poorly, and I do think that it was a good move not to be like, I have the answer, because if you did and you hadn't like stopped it, I'd be pretty pissed. All right, so let's move on to context. Context is like world building and politics and stuff like that. So like, what is this world and who has the powers? And so because this is sort of like an alternative history book, this world is very similar to our world couple hundred years ago, I guess. In a sense, the only like world building that you see is the magic, the silver working and stuff. And the politics, R.F. Kuang like opens up the book with an excerpt explaining like all the research that she did and stuff. And I didn't also do the research, so I'm just gonna buy it. And from what I know, just from like movies and other books that I read, it works. I don't know how colleges like that function, but I understood everything that I felt like I needed to get the world of Oxford within the context of this book. And I wasn't super lost on how politics work outside of Oxford in this book. So I think that she did a good job just like kind of making the politics work around this story that she wanted to tell. I don't think she bent anything. I think she just like applied them well. The magic in and of itself, I thought was pretty interesting. Like, it took a while to get to what it actually does, but the fact that it creates an effect, and no one's always positive what the effect is going to be based off of like inscribing the same word in two different languages onto this enchanted silver bar, and then whatever the meaning is in between, because like translation is always an act of betrayal, and a lot of meaning gets lost because different words mean different things. Like, all that gets manifested into some kind of effect. I thought was really interesting. Maybe this is like a craft thing, or maybe it fits in here. I'm not entirely sure. Because this magic system is so based around words and different languages, there's a lot of etymology in this book. Etymology, not entomology, bug studies. etymology, like the roots of words and what they mean and stuff. That shit was infuriatingly dull for me. I like a little bit of that here and there, and I find that interesting just like for writing prompts for like poems and all that. But I think there's just so much of it. It would be like, it's like too much dressing on a salad. You know what I'm saying? It's like that old Jim Gaffigan joke. I like salad dressing with just a touch of lettuce. So it was like simultaneously fascinating. And I think if you're into etymology and you like fantasy, this is probably like right up your alley. But I think for me, it was just a little too much. And I found it kind of boring. And I felt like it kind of got in the way of the actual plot. One of the things that I guess this would be, I don't know where this would fit, but one of the things that I said about Yellowface that I think also applies here is that it feels like a movie that's about how great Hollywood is or was or whatever. And I find those things kind of uninteresting. And so, like, a book that's all about language and words, well, it's not all about that, but a book that's very like focused on language and words and stuff. I don't know. There is something about it that's just not for me. And now I think I've just kind of naturally moved into craft. I don't really have anything to say about the actual like word structure or the way R.F. Kuang puts sentences together, because I think it was fine. This is super different from Yellowface because like the era and the world and the genre is completely different than Yellowface. But yeah, it's fine. You know, it's alright. Nothing really stood out to me other than there's a lot of like just talking about words and their definitions that kind of took me out of it at times, because that was just a little bit much. Yeah, I wasn't like stunned by anything, but I was like, yeah, it's good. You know, I think for the most part, I would say like each character had a distinct voice, and the words were like put together well, and that's, yeah, like I think every character had their own distinct voice. Like, you know, it wasn't confusing who was speaking and when, that kind of thing. And I think even kind of changing, I don't quite remember, but I think there's a little bit of a change in language from like Letty's narration from the rest of the quartet of students that are like buddies. I think R.F. Kuang is a good writer. The thing that I was gonna say before is that this is a thought that I had like a couple of days ago. I was thinking about this book and reflecting on it, and I thought to myself that I think that R.F. Kuang writes more so to like as a demonstration of intellect as opposed to like artistic expression, if that makes sense. And I'm not saying that she's not also expressing and telling a story that she wants to tell, but in the two examples that I have read now, it does just kind of feel like a demonstration of how smart she is and how brilliant she is. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. You know, like a guitar player who solos is showing off their skills. And it's kind of that. Like, she's literary shredding, and I'm maybe more drawn to people who are a little bit more poetic and a little bit more expressive, and they're a little bit I said this in the private Discord for patrons, but it's like the difference between somebody who can compose or understands the math of music and then like a blues player who just really feels the music but may only use 5 notes in a pentatonic scale. You know what I'm saying? I think for me, I just enjoy sort of like simpler, more poetic prose. And I think that I love the idea of books that are love letters to stories, but not necessarily love letters to words and etymology. I think there's obviously going to be a bit of that with any story that's like, oh, aren't stories great? But I also just, you know, I heard someone else call this book a literary masterpiece, and I would agree, but I don't like masterpieces. You know what I'm saying? I think that, like, I don't like high art because I'm just not a highbrow, academic, big brain kind of guy. You know, I'm just a fucking dude. And so this is so while I can acknowledge that this one's good, I don't really like it that much. You know, like, I like it a lot more than Yellowface. You know, if somebody was like, yo, dude, historical fantasy. Like, if somebody hit me up and was like, AOD, historical fantasy, what's your recommendation? This would not be it. It would definitely be A Master of Jin by P. Shelley Clark. But if they ask me for a second one, then I might recommend this one. I feel like I just answered the 3 questions of was it good? Yeah. Did I enjoy it? Not really. Like, I should probably just start using star ratings or something like that. But like, I wasn't having a blast, you know, but I didn't hate it. You know, like this was not an unpleasant thing. The first like 60% of the book, I was pretty bored and was just sort of passively reading it. Not super engaged, but I didn't hate it. So yeah, I enjoyed it. And would I recommend it? Like, again, yeah, like if someone was like, I need this number of recommendations, I was like, I gotta pad these numbers, then yeah, this would probably be in that list. But it's definitely not gonna be like a first recommendation for me. That's not because I think it's low quality. That's just because I didn't like it that much. Stuff can be good and you can not like it, and stuff can be bad and you can fucking love it. I've been going through like a weird Mortal Kombat phase, so I've watched like all the movies, and most of them are not good, but I like most of them. I don't think I have anything more to say on this book. I should definitely take more notes. I won't be doing that for Samantha Shannon's book because it's like 900 pages. And if I made a video where I read all the notes that I took over a 900-page book, it'd be like a 3-hour video, and I'm not doing that. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you made it to the end. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. If you want to support the channel just a little bit more and gain exclusive access to content you won't find anywhere else, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. There you get an extra rent review video from me per month, plus access to my exclusive podcast feed where I do audio versions of these videos, and like as well as like little bonus podcast episodes here and there. And you also gain access to my private Discord server, the Don't Fret Club Discord server, where you can chat with me and a bunch of other really lovely people talking about books, writing, anime, movies, video games, whatever. We're probably talking about it. You want to know what somebody's pet lizard looks like? Come to my Discord. It's not huge. Like, this channel isn't huge and the Patreon's not huge, but we're getting to the point where it is just fun to be a part of the community, and we would love to have you as a part of that community as well. So if any of that sounds interesting or exciting to you, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. And if Patreon's not really your thing and you still want more content from me, check out my second channel, Don't Fret 64, where I'm reacting to anime, talking about manga eventually. Right now I'm watching Haikyuu and Mob Psycho 100. And if anime is not really your thing and you still want more content from me, I cannot help you. I'm making so much content right now, and that's all I got. So yeah, thanks again so much for watching this video. I appreciate you. My name is D. Don't fret. I'll see you next time. Hey, before I go, I got to give a shout out to my super duper don't fretters, Keisha, Sable, Knightsmith, and Cassie. Thank you so much for your support. You're helping me make this content and do more of what I love to do. If you want to shout out and gain access to all that bonus content I talked about before, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon.